basically hitchhiking and backpacking my way down the east coast of Africa. I started in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania and made my way down to Malawi, Zambia, and finally I found myself in Mozambique. And Mozambique's a very interesting country. There was a massive civil war raging there for over 20 years, and a very bloody civil war, one of the worst the world has ever seen. And I really began my career as a photographer there, not as a professional photographer, but just someone documenting life around me. So that was how I got my start. And then since then, I have moved back to India and I entered the world of publishing. I have a numerous number of books now been published. Gujarat, A Journey was my first book, followed by other award-winning books such as Glorious Hotels of India, The Indian Golf Story, Dining with the Nawabs, Patron, Prince and Patriarch, the story of the Maharaja of Jagatjit Singh of Kapurthala, and the Jodhpur Lancers. I am working on my 10th book at the moment, and it should be out later this year. Many of you who are probably familiar with a book called School. It's a big blue tome of a book, weighs about 5 kgs on the Dune School, and it was a book that I had done for the 75th Jubilee of School. So, like I said, my work also extends to editorial, food, street photography, and I've shot for various magazines such as Architectural Digest, The Rob Report, Harper's Bazaar, Elle, and my photographs have appeared in numerous other magazines, publications. So over the last few years, I have been documenting the changing landscapes around India, and in particular the Himalaya, the high Himalaya, which I'll talk about a little later. Two of my most sort of memorable documentations were with the World Wildlife Fund, when the Western India Tiger Landscape Project was being initiated in 2014. And in 2019, I went to Maharashtra, to Ratnagiri, and worked very closely over a week with a group of people who are protecting the pangolin, which is the most highly trafficked animal in the world. I was born in India, but I've lived in New York, Shanghai, Paris, and Seoul. Of course, I studied at school and then Ithaca College in America, and finally at the International Center of Photography in New York. So I'll begin with Mozambique, and these are some of my images from there. So this was a very bloody civil war that came off the polarizing effects of the Cold War, actually, and fought between two groups, Frelimo and Renamo. Both absolutely brutal in their fighting methods, with child soldiers, absolutely indiscriminate killings, a really sort of dark period in the world's history. I found myself there right towards the tail end, and I was visiting northern Mozambique, actually to go to this little island called Ilha de Mozambique, which used to be the jewel of the Portuguese Empire. It's like this European city in the middle of the Indian Ocean on a tiny island. Absolutely stunningly brilliant. And Vasco da Gama himself had his main home over there. When Mozambique got its independence, UNESCO wanted to make it a World Heritage Site, but the Mozambican government absolutely refused because it was such a devastating reminder of their colonial past that they wanted nothing to do with it. They just hoped it would sink into the ocean. So it's a bit of a deserted place, but it's got some of the most spectacular scuba diving in the world, and some really other sort of interesting architecture in the middle of Africa. Really, it's a European architecture. So some of these images, I was still shooting on film at the time. I carried about 30 rolls of film with me to Mozambique and shooting with an old beat up Canon EOS camera, and spent hours on the backs of pickup trucks and hitchhiking and various places. Mozambique is extremely poor. The locals themselves have all come out of this bloody civil war, so it's still very fresh in their memory. The photograph that you're seeing on the left with these two jolly chaps, one guy laughing, this is actually a back of a pickup truck filled of dried fish. And I was on the back of this truck for 12 hours with these two guys, and we didn't speak a single word of the same language to each other. They spoke Portuguese and Bantu, which is a language that is spoken in that part of the world. I didn't speak any Portuguese at the time, but yet we communicated and had a fabulous time. In the middle of the night, we were stopped at a rebel checkpost, which was run by Renamo at the time. And there were child soldiers there. There was a girl who was 12 years old. She was carrying an AK-47. Luckily, the incident passed with them fine, but they were chewing cut, which is a mild stimulant given to a lot of these soldiers, which sort of numbs their brains and allows them to go into battle and things like that. So it was a bit hairy and a bit scary for sure. This grainy effect that you're seeing on the photograph is when you use really high-speed film. So this is like 3200 speed black and white film, which sort of gives this effect. So Ilha de Mozambique, like I was saying, is a really fascinating place. There's this chap in the middle is holding a whole bunch of parrotfish. These are just people fishing for themselves. And the really rich waters of the east coast of Africa and the Indian Ocean are just teeming with absolutely incredible wildlife and fish life. In fact, one of the largest whale shark migrations happens there every February. And if any of you are scuba divers, I would highly recommend going there and checking it out. The other thing that is really rife there is AIDS, unfortunately. And you do see a lot of the population which has been decimated. So you see really young people and you see really old people, but there's a whole sort of section in the middle where you see very few middle-aged people. So just sort of interesting dynamics of my time in Africa. While I was in Africa, I got to document a bunch of other things besides just Mozambique. Here is a photograph of mine that was published by National Geographic in their book called The 10 Best of Everything. It's a very famous peak at the back. Most of you probably recognize it. It's Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest peak on the African continent at about 19,000 feet. I chose not to climb Kilimanjaro because instead along with 3 other Doskos, my younger brother Viraj and my cousins Rushad and Veer Nanavati, who some of you might know, we decided to climb a peak called Socialist Peak. Which is where this photograph is taken from. And you're seeing these clouds in front, which is actually the Serengeti Plain. So you actually walk through the Serengeti, you climb up into this lush rainforest and finally get onto the craters of these old extinct volcanoes. And you get up to this point. And that's my younger brother Biraj over there. And I shot this from the peak of that. We got there at daybreak, and you just get these stunning views of Kilimanjaro in the background. So I moved to India 15 years ago, and it all started with an exhibition at the India International Center in Delhi. While I was in New York, it was George W. Bush was running for his second term as president. And there was this really crazy movement of protest in New York at the time. The Republican National Convention was being held in New York. And as many of you know, New York is a very blue state, a democratic state. So for them to have their sort of grand party in New York was unheard of. And all of a sudden, there was a lot of art and creativity in protest. And for weeks and weeks on end, there were protests all across the city. And I started documenting that. And I showed that work to people here in India, and it was published. And the India International Center decided to have an exhibition. From there, I've gone on to do a number of exhibitions all across India and around the world. The most recent being at the Gallery of Glass in Delhi, which is a gallery run by a lady by the name of Renu Modi. And it was a solo show on my work to do with forgotten spaces in the old palaces and forts of India. So in 2008, I entered into the world of publishing. And when I say that, not me as a publisher, but as a photographer. So I was commissioned to do my first book, which is a book on Gujarat. And these are fabulous projects because one really gets to spend, a year and a half, 2 years traveling the length and breadth of an entire state. And you really get to understand the people, the food, the culture, the wildlife, the landscapes, and plan these itineraries. So it really is a great way to discover one's own country. It was my discovery of India, let's put it that way, after living abroad for so many years. And Gujarat is a fascinating state. It's got, of course, the only population of the Asiatic lion, but it's also got some amazing marine life. And if you haven't visited the Little Run or the Great Run of Kutch, I would highly recommend it. The Little Run of Kutch is home to the Indian wild ass, which I'll talk about a little bit later as well. It's got some fabulous birding sites across the country. The next book I did, which many of you might be familiar with, was School. And this was a real passion project for me. I got to go back to school after all those years and got to live in school, which was amazing. I tease my friends besides work, it's like living at the Gymkhana Club. I mean, you wake up in the morning, you go for PT, you go for a swim, then you have breakfast and assembly, and then, you're in the archives the whole day. And then you're doing STA and, playing whatever season it is, you're on the football pitch or the hockey pitch, or you're in the swimming pool. So it was really fabulous. And I had unfettered access to the archives, which is run by Alia Kezelbash. She's still there. And it was really great to sort of go in and dig deep and find the history of the school. I actually discovered an old box of film from the 1950s, which had been processed, but a lot of those images had never been seen before or printed. So if you have a copy of this book, I would suggest you take a relook at them and see some amazing images. What I decided to do here was, one thing the DOSCOs are known for is their ability to tell tall tales or yarn tales. That is a lot of fun always. And this book is really anecdotal that way. So it's all about the stories of school and the stories we've grown up with and the stories we've heard, besides being full of great photography and unseen before photography, etc. So yeah, there's some snippets, of course. There's some ode pages to R.L. Holdsworth, to Sheel Vora. And so for example, if you're looking here, Vikram Seth's first ever published work is actually a poem called If I Were a Monkey, which appeared in the Weekly. So take a look at that. It's a lot of fun. From there, I did a few other books, but sort of my real big book, which again, it's available and many of you might have seen, is a book called Dining with the Nawabs. So this book the concept was done by Roli Books, a big publishing house here in India. And it's a story of 10 Muslim noble families across India and Pakistan. And it's not only about their food, but it's about their homes, their lifestyle, how they live. And of course, the recipes are very important. Most of these recipes will be lost. So people don't eat that way anymore. And also, unlike the Maharajas, the Nawabs are far more insular. They're more private. So to be given this unfettered access was absolutely amazing. And all the text was done by Meera Ali. Her husband is a very famous filmmaker, Muzaffar Ali. He's made Umrao Jan, and he's also the Raja of Kotwara. A few anecdotes and stories from here. This image that you're seeing sort of towards the bottom of your screen is the Nawab Saab of Zainabad, Shabir, with his son Dhanraj. Shabir Malik himself has been a very passionate wildlife conservationist. He has won the Getty Award from the World Wildlife Fund for his conservation work of the Indian wild ass. They were being hunted and poached right across the Little Run of Kutch. And he single-handedly put a really brave fight and stopped a lot of that. And if you notice, there's this dog in this picture, and this is a Saluki, which is a Persian hunting dog. The royal family of Zainabad still has a number of Salukis. They had 22 at a time. And one of their favorite pastimes was coursing. Now, for you, those of you who don't know what coursing is, it is when they release a hare or a rabbit into the desert and give it a good 200-yard start, and then they release the hounds, so to speak. And they actually chase the rabbits, try and catch them, and you're following them in a jeep while you're photographing it and shooting it. So absolutely wild experience to be doing that. And these Salukis are magnificent creatures. In full gait, all four of their legs are actually above the ground. and they're running. This particular time, the rabbit did manage to get away, so we didn't have rabbit for dinner that night. But it really was an incredible sight to see. They're also one of the last families that still hunts with falcons. Falconry is again a dying art in India, still practiced in the Middle East a little bit, but they did have a couple of hooded falcons. I'm not sure if they're still around. We also got to spend a lot of time in Pakistan. By we, I mean the publisher, the author, and myself. We actually traveled over 1,100 kilometers across Pakistan and got to dine and meet with the Nawab Sahib of Bhabalpur as well as Khairpur, just to give you some sort of geographical perspective. If Ganganagar in India, if you draw a straight line, you come to Bhabalpur in Pakistan. And Jaisalmer, if you draw a straight line, you go across the Thar, you come to Khairpur. So one's in Sindh and one's in the Punjab. And another funny anecdote from here was we were meeting with the Nawab Sahib of Khairpur, and he laid out this most incredible spread, and there was a ran on the table. And I'm a bit surprised to see it because it's definitely larger than any ran I've ever seen in my life. And so very casually, I was like, so Nawab Sahib, this ran looks a bit large. What, did you kill a large goat? He said, no, it's black buck. Because hunting is still allowed in Pakistan. And they said, you're so lucky you have so many black bucks in India. I was like, well, that's because we haven't poached them all. So that fence is really doing some good for us, at least, and keeping the black buck safe on our side. But yeah, this book, like I said, is it's a wonderful book. And if you do get an opportunity, please do pick it up. It's got lots of wonderful recipes, but also goes into the history of the Muslim nobility across India and Pakistan. The next book I did was a book called Glorious Hotels of India, also published by Rowley Books in 2018. And this book was, again, gave me the opportunity to travel all across the country. Yeah, you can be jealous because I got to stay in all these fabulous hotels, ranging from Ladakh to the Andaman Islands to Kerala to everything. And it was my job to photograph them and live in there. So yeah, one of the perks of being a photographer, for sure. But it's a book that deals with interior spaces, architecture, and again, it's really beautiful, and it really got me to explore parts of the country I may have not gone to in the past. The book has contributions from Stephen Fry, Yasmin Le Bon, Christian Louboutin, and Elizabeth Hurley. And it features lots of properties that are owned by DSOBS, which is great, such as Dilip, who was part of the talks here a few weeks ago, Dushyant Singh, Dhananjay, and Niklender Singh, and Anshuman Prakash. All right, so I'd like to sort of move on to the work that I have been doing with the environment. So working with the environment and documenting fragile ecosystems and critical habitats is something I really enjoy. It's the work I do pro bono for various organizations. So the Ranthambore Tiger Reserve, which I'm sure all of you have either visited or are familiar with, holds the source population of tigers for Western India, which disperse into the adjoining national parks and wildlife sanctuaries through wildlife corridors, and they go in search of food and to find a mate. So this map that you're seeing on the left-hand side is a map that's from the WWF, from the WWF. And we started our journey in Tonk, which is the westernmost region where you will find the Bengal tiger. And it's, so the areas that you're seeing in dark green are the protected areas. However, tigers move right across the yellow areas as well, which is marked by the black lines that you're seeing. And those are areas that have huge human populations, they're densely populated. Some are agricultural areas. You also have the Chambal River that runs through. So yes, they are protected areas, and the Forest Department is doing a wonderful job, and our tiger numbers are increasing. However, that is not enough. The landscape here is the landscape of Ranthambore National Park, for example, is a mix of dense forests comprising mostly of dhark trees, a species known to withstand like long periods of drought and heat. and their grasslands on the plateau. Their old ruins, palaces, and forts, which form the backdrop of these forests, which were once the private hunting grounds of the Maharajas of Jaipur. While the tiger is the top predator here, other endangered wildlife also include the leopard, striped hyena, the caracal, jungle cat, and blackbuck. The forests and wildlife are threatened by habitat degradation, habitat fragmentation, encroachment, poaching of tigers and prey species, and of course, human-wildlife conflict. So in December 2014, I spent 7 days with the WWF team documenting the work they started in the Western India tiger landscape. And the team consisted of research experts, biologists, senior officials, and in fact, Mr. Ravi Singh, who is the Secretary General and the CEO of the World Wildlife Fund. So we started our journey in Tonk, like I mentioned before, and made our way to Ranthambore, then made our way into what is now the Kela Devi Sanctuary. It never used to exist then, but it's another protected area. And then across the Chambal into Madhya Pradesh, into Puno Palpur, which we'll talk about in a bit as well, carrying on further into Madhav National Park near Shivpuri, and then further north from Morena to Bharatpur. And speaking of Morena and Bharatpur, if you look at this map, there was actually this tiger which left Ranthambore and made his way all the way up to Mathura. So you can just imagine what he had to go through to get there. And then from Mathura, finally, he's like, I've seen enough over here. And he went to Bharatpur and was hanging out over there for a little while. And the reason we know this is because these particular tigers have been collared, so they can be radio tracked, but there are so many that are not. So they actually are roaming around in like this very large, densely populated area. So the main issues I observed and documented were the wildlife here faces a serious threat of habitat loss and fragmentation due to developmental projects and encroachment by villagers. As populations increase, the villages expand further into forest land, converting these habitats into agricultural land and grazing spots. Large areas of the forest have also been diverted for developmental projects and displacing of wildlife and local communities living in the fringes. The remaining forests are not as healthy and pristine as they historically were due to the increased human presence. Frequent collection of fuel wood by villagers for cooking, heating, and lighting leads to the degradation of these forests, and the constant interference disturbs wildlife. Furthermore, there's illegal and unregulated cattle grazing, which spreads disease amongst wild herbivores. So this is all the things that we were documenting at the time. There are the lesser known species which get run over on a road, people driving. So yeah, it's a difficult balance, and there are experts out there. I'm not an expert at all on wildlife conservation, or am I a biologist by any means, but as a photographer and as one gets to document these various things, one gets to see what the main issues are. And I really hope that organizations like the WWF and in conjunction with the local forest departments are trying to do a job to save this. But then again, it also is down to us not to spread the word of awareness, as well as not encroach into these areas. So the other project which I documented is a project on the pangolin, a lesser species that many of you may not really be familiar with. However, the pangolin is the most trafficked animal on this planet. And it's really sad. The pangolin is actually a mammal, which a lot of people don't know. It's the scaly anthill, but it is a mammal, absolutely. And the work I was doing was with the Sahyadri and Nisarga Mitra. The Sahyadris are a mountain range in the western part of Maharashtra in the Ratnagiri district. And in 2016, a treaty over 180 governments announced that they would end all illegal trade of pangolins and further protect the species from extinction. However, illegal trade of the species continues, and the highest demand still comes from China. Last year, the government of Singapore intercepted and seized 26 tons of pangolin scales bound for Vietnam. Now, I'll just give you a little bit of perspective. One pangolin scale weighs about 100 grams. and they seized 26 tons. So you can just imagine how many pangolins were killed just in that one shipment alone that was seized. So in this small rural village, tucked away on the Maharashtrian coast, there is a group of these unsung heroes. In 2019, I was on assignment for the HCL Wildlife Grants project, and had the honor of spending time with a gentleman by the name of Bhau Katdare. This is Bhau in this checked shirt on your screens over here, and his group of volunteers. We trekked through wet jungles, visited villages across a 200-kilometer radius, talked to locals about the illegal poaching, checked camera traps, hidden in the forest for movement, and had discussions with the local authorities about what they were doing to stop poachers. The first line of defense in the global battle against poaching and illegal wildlife trade. That's who these guys are. And Bhau and his group of volunteers are just regular village folk. Bhau himself used to be a professional wrestler, and he finished his wrestling life and career and dedicated his life to saving the pangolin, which is absolutely amazing. So Katdare found the Sahayadri and the Sarga Mitra, a non-profit operating for the past 26 years, and has been spreading awareness about pangolins right across Ratnagiri. Over the past 2 years, 23 pangolins have been rescued by local people with the help of his organization and the forest department. The pangolin has been in the news of late with the spread, actually even during COVID across the globe. And they're one of the most trafficked mammals in Asia and increasingly in Africa. And pangolins are high demand, like I said, in China and Vietnam. Their meat is considered a delicacy, but it's the scales which are used in traditional medicine and folk remedies. There are 8 species of pangolin, and all are protected under the national and international laws, but there's still a growing illegal trade in pangolins. And based on reports and seizures, an estimated of 5 lakh pangolins were killed, which represents only the tip of the trade. And experts believe that seizures represent as little as 10% of the actual volume of pangolins in illegal wildlife trade. So, yeah. So like I said, we were checking camera traps, literally going from dhaba to dhaba, home to home, handing out these pamphlets. Bhau and his group will basically get information from local villagers, people's homes, if they've spotted a pangolin. Pangolins are quite shy. They're nocturnal creatures. He's also managed to develop an app, which is incredible. And all of them can share information no matter where they are, stretched across the district, on where they've seen, and they get to upload pictures here from the camera traps to check the health of animals, and also make sure that poachers are not entering into the forest. So yes, that is about pangolins. Now, moving on to something else that really is a passion project and part of my job as well. I started a bespoke travel company in 2015 called Talisker Expeditions, and I specialize in high altitude treks in the Khumbu region of Nepal, which is the Everest region of Nepal, and driving safaris in Ladakh and jungle safaris in India. So I have been spending the last 7 years in Everest. I take small groups of people up to do the Everest Base Camp trek, but also a bunch of other treks in that area on the Khumbu Glacier and various places. I have seen absolutely devastatingly large changes in the environment at these high altitudes. This image that you're seeing on your left-hand side was shot in April 2 years ago. That's right before the pandemic, actually, in 2019, sorry, 3 years ago now. And I remember all the years subsequently to that, the hill that you're seeing on your right-hand side was fully covered with snow, as well as these high hills over here. And as you can see, it's absolutely bare. There's not a single, except for these few sort of gullies here of snow. You're seeing a big glacial valley over here, and I'm standing on the lateral moraine of the glacier, looking down the valley towards the terminal moraine. And the glacier retreated many, many years ago, but still there were large ice fields over here, which no longer exist. I went back last year in October, and the ice fields were not there either. And trust, when I say the ice fields, I mean, this is above, close to about 15,000 feet. So even during the monsoon months, it does snow over here. And there was no snow whatsoever. And these are the areas where you see climate change happening the most drastically. On the right-hand side, you're actually seeing what an expedition camp to the summit of Everest looks like. They physically camp on the Khumbu Glacier itself, which is the highest glacier in the world. The human footprint is immense. The kind of equipment they take up and just the footprint is just it's crazy. The image that you're seeing on top, actually you can see that's Mount Everest, that dome over there, and which is the highest peak in the world. And that peak with snow blowing off of it is Lhotse, which is the 4th highest peak in the world. So just a little bit about some of the things that I've noticed up here is that, so Nepal, many of you who travel there, still gets its major foreign income through mountaineering and trekking. The industry has boomed and given rise to a huge number of tour operators. Unfortunately, they have very little regard for the environment, and they do not brief their clients on how ecologically sensitive the area they are trekking in. The Sherpa people who actually live there moved to this area from Tibet hundreds of years ago, and they are simple subsistence farmers. And being from this high altitude region made them conducive to helping Western climbing expeditions fulfill their dreams of climbing the highest peaks in the world. Poorly paid, overworked, and not given their fair due, the Sherpas continued to work diligently till the ill-famed 1996 Everest expedition, where a number of Sherpas died trying to save foreign climbers. John Krakauer penned the now famous book Into Thin Air about that doomed expedition, and the Sherpas finally began demanding their rights to be paid fairly and given insurance policies to protect their families in case anything happened to them while climbing. Some of the challenges that are faced in this region are that, number one, there are just way too many people. There are too many climbers, there are too many trekkers, and what I've noticed is that all these people, over 180,000 trekkers and climbers went into the Sagarmatha National Park last year. All their waste, human waste, I'm talking about just pee and poo, right, goes into the streams and rivers. The lodges do not have septic tanks, so this water is literally going down into the water table and going into some of the most pristine glaciers and streams where people are just drinking out of straight off the bat. There's a lot of plastic pollution, water bottles, Coke cans, oxygen cylinders, old tents and things like that up there as well. And one of the other thing is that the inexperienced climbers trying to fulfill their egos to reach the highest peaks in the world. You know, we live in an Instagram generation now where everything needs to be documented and clicked and, you know, I did this and I did that. And this has made this region unsafe. And also just brought a huge influx of people in there who are not abiding by rules, and as a result causing a lot of damage in the area. There's indiscriminate construction of lodges using steel and concrete across the region as well. So that is something that again is playing massively in this particular area. So, I mean, it's easy to point out these things, but they are solutions, and it takes the will of government and private people working on them as well. And someone like me who does run a business over here, for me, it's in my highest interest to try and protect this area. There is a term that is being used now called last chance tourism. And it's a term that I sort of started becoming familiar with a few years ago, that, you know, people now want to visit these places, you know, be it far places off in Alaska or the Khumbu region of Nepal, because these places will not exist like this within the next decade. So it really is your last chance for this kind of tourism to really see these areas and these kind of areas. And like the forests as well in certain parts of the world, which are being logged and felled. So some of the solutions that I have come up with and I'd like to abide by, and I've actually been now petitioning the local Sagarmatha National Park Committee as well as the Nepal government, is to limit the number of permits given to both trekkers and climbers, you know, which can charge a higher fee. You can still make your money that way, but just limit the number of people going in there. The second thing is there's a principle of trekking and climbing called LNT, which is leave no trace. There's an organization based in the United States which actually teaches that, and it should be mandatory for any organization leading groups into the wild to get this certification. As the name suggests, it's not about just not leaving a trace when you go in there, but actually bringing everything out with you. It's staying on paths. People like to go romping around in meadows because why? They get that lovely photograph for Instagram, but they're actually causing massive damage to wild plants, little insects who live in there, and things like that, or bees pollinate those areas. So really stick on, the identified paths when you're trekking. And the other thing that there is no permit, there's a trekking permit, but no other real certification required for you to climb peaks like Everest and Lhotse and Nuptse, the highest peaks in the world, these 8,000ers. And I've often found it interesting that these are dangerous activities, number one. And just like scuba diving, and a lot of you are scuba divers, possibly, you need to get a certification before you can go down to certain depths and scuba dive. So there should be a sort of a permit that allows you to climb these highest peaks in the world. You have to have already done a number of other peaks possibly, or again, I'm not an expert, but these are just solutions and ideas that would really help this region. Also using green architecture and using locally sourced materials for these lodges would do well. They can start a system where they can make proper septic tanks. So, the waste is not just going into the ground and going into the groundwater. So yeah, these are some of the things that I've noticed in this area. I've been lucky enough to document it. I will continue to document it, and happy to share my work with anyone who's out there willing to listen to make a change. These are just some images of the Khumbu Glacier, some climbers practicing on this area. There has been talks and newspaper articles of where they want to move the Everest Base Camp from where it is on the glacier to a different place. I really hope that happens. So yeah, let's see. So I won't take any more of your time, and I'd be happy to open this out to some questions and answers. And on your screens, I'll just leave a slideshow of some of my favorite wildlife images that I have shot over the last few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Karam. I think open to anyone for any questions they might have.
Yeah, I wanted to find out something.
Sure, Dhiraj.
Yeah, Karam, in your introduction,
Yes,
you've written that you're a first responder.
that's right.
Yeah, so can you just tell us
Certainly. So there's an organization based in Missoula in Montana called Erie Backcountry Medicine. They are part of a larger network called the Wilderness Medicine Society, which Knowles is also part of, the North American Outdoor Leadership School. And they offer courses in wilderness first aid. So there's a wilderness first aid, then there's a wilderness advanced first aid. And the third and the highest one that's operated and allowed here in India is something called the Wilderness First Responder. So the Wilderness First Responder course is a very intensive 9-day course that is offered at the Hannafil Center in Landor in Missouri, which is a school of outdoor Himalayan education. And a lot of injuries happen in the backcountry, anything from a gunshot wound to, you twist your ankle and break it, to being bitten by a snake. These are not only injuries that can happen in the backcountry, they can happen in our country as well, so in your home. So it's very interesting, the term wilderness. How is wilderness defined? Wilderness medically is actually defined as that if you are more than 1 hour away from a multi-speciality hospital, you are considered to be in wilderness. Now, for many of us, that's actually our homes. If I need to get myself to, let's say, Medanta, which is a multi-speciality hospital at peak rush hour traffic, sitting in Delhi, that may take me more than 1 hour. So, I'm considered wilderness, even though I'm living in the middle of Delhi. So I need to be able to know how to treat the first signs of, say, a heart attack or a snake bite or whatever it is, even in my own home. So these are some really fabulous courses that are offered by the Hannafil Center, and I'll be happy to share any information that you may have privately on these courses. And they're offered right throughout the year. The Wilderness First Responder is, like I said, the most intensive course. It's 9 days, but if you don't have 9 days to spare, there's a 4-day course called the Wilderness Advanced First Aid, which is also offered at the IMF here in Delhi, which is conducted by the instructors of the Hannafil Center. And then there's something called the WFA, which is a 3-day course. I can't hear you. Sorry.
Karam, hi, this is Shubhendu here.
Hi, Shubhendu.
I just wanted to understand, though a lot of schools have taken initiatives in terms of students doing some kind of work on global warming and climate change. But unfortunately, at a national level, nothing visible seems to be happening. So any insights whether you've had some interactions with the Ministry of Environment or they have something coming up, because this is something serious, and India with a large population and a large area has opportunity to significantly contribute to the world.
Absolutely, Shubhendu, and you're 100% right. Not enough is being done in India today to address climate change. I have not heard a single one of our members in Parliament address this issue on any sort of level whatsoever. 30,000 crores has been allocated to clean the Ganga. I am not seeing where that's happening or how that's happening. The Yamuna every year gets frothy and filthy. There is, I'm not sure how many of you heard the Prime Minister's speech at Independence Day this year. There were a couple of factual discrepancies, let's put it that way. India has actually lost 19% of its forest cover in the last 2 years.
90%?
19.
19.
Yeah, in certain areas, and it's not being talked about enough. Many of you drive to Dehradun. I do very frequently. All of us have driven that road to Dehradun. After you cross Chutmalpur and you drive through the Shivaliks, through Rajaji National Park until you come to Mohan Tunnel, there is a huge amount of work going on right now in the riverbed. An elevated highway is being made. This is a seismic zone. And goes right through a protected national park of our country. Yes, there are some benefits. People are saying that though it's an elevated highway and the wildlife will be able to travel freely between underneath it, etc. I understand that. However, what are you doing to the river? This is a source of water for hundreds of thousands of people who live downstream in the plains towards Saharanpur, etc. Where's that water going? Like I once again said, it's a seismic region, and people sort of taking cognizance of that. I don't think enough is being done, absolutely honestly. And we have a bunch of members of Parliament from our alma mater as well. And I really hope that at least some of them can push this agenda through with senior people in their party and in power right now. And I really, really hope, because we are really at a crisis point at the moment. It's all well and good to make these protected areas, but we are creating islands. Ranthambore is becoming an island, Corbett is becoming an island, Sariska is becoming an island. Going back to what the Western Indian Tiger Landscape Project is trying to do is really make these wildlife corridors, increase forest cover so that wildlife can move freely between one area and the other. Otherwise, what you're doing, you're basically just making glorified safari parks that are fenced in and everything's protected inside and nothing outside. So what happens is become large zoos, and animals will eventually try to move out. And that is where the human and animal conflict happens.
In fact, this summer was a good indicator because we used to hear Rajasthan clocking 48, 49. This year, Delhi NCR clocked 48, 49.
Absolutely. I mean, it's happening in front of us. So yes, it does start at the school level, and I really hope that schools are beginning to address this issue in the classroom very seriously. It's not like civics class where it's like, oh, don't litter and don't do this. Now it's really reached a point of crisis, and we need to tackle it front on.
Karam, I'm just amazed at all that you've shared with us. I think your experiences have been so varied. But what is fantastic is that you've been eloquent about all the critical issues that we need to address. And I cannot express my gratitude to know that you have set up a tour agency at that height, and you're trying to make a visible difference. Thank you so much for all of that.
No, my pleasure. Absolutely, Kavita. Thank you. And like I said, I try to. So that's another thing. In the last 7 years, I've been doing this. This October will be my 11th trip to the base camp of Everest. And in those 11th time to base camp and 7 years and all the hundreds of people I've taken up, we have consumed exactly 2 plastic bottles of water.
Wow.
We filter all our own water on the way up, and therefore we don't leave any waste and come down. The other thing I've started making it mandatory is for my particular groups that I take back, we bring back 8 kilograms of garbage per person trekking up there. That's other people's garbage or whatever's left up there from mountaineers, etc. We bring them back to Namche Bazaar, which is the capital of the Khumbu region. And from there, then the Sagar Mata National Park Pollution Committee takes over and they bring it down to Kathmandu. So I just wish other groups will start doing this as well. And like I said, I keep trying to educate other tour operators on this. But the main thing is try to actually make it policy as opposed to just something where you're trying to convince people to do it.
That's fantastic. Well done.
Thank you.
Hi, Karam, Sarabjit here.
Hi, Sarabjit.
How are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Quick question. Firstly, amazing work. I was also looking forward to seeing maybe there's some motor mechanic stuff still going on in your photography. But my question, any projects where you've connected photography with mainstream education or life skills development? Would love to hear
Yes,
that. Or...
absolutely. And thank you for asking that question. In the interest of time, I didn't prepare like a presentation on that. So unfortunately, now it's stopped. But for 5 years straight, I worked with the Dara Shikoh Foundation for the Arts, which was run by a lady in Kashmir. She's Dr. Karan Singh's daughter. And Dara Shikoh Foundation for the Arts was an educational foundation where I taught photography in Kashmir, in Srinagar, to kids who did not have that opportunity, to really give them, it was part of a larger sort of umbrella. There was writing workshops and theater workshops, and there was photography workshops, and I used to teach those for a period of 5 years. And it was really great to interact with young kids and have the camera and take them out into the field. And every year I used to have a different theme. And one of them was archiving and documenting, why archiving is really so important as a form of photography. It's one thing to have the written word, and the written word is great in books, but it's always open to interpretation. A photograph can't lie. You see something and that's exactly how it is. So it's one thing to say that the Khumbu Glacier is not retreating, written in a book, but when you go there and actually photograph it and say, no, it actually is, here it is, this is how it's documented. So it's that was something that I sort of tried to drill into the digital students that I used to have. I have also run photography workshops here in Delhi privately and in Mussoorie. But yeah, the Dara Shikoh Foundation for the Arts, and unfortunately it no longer exists. After the trouble started there again a few years ago, it wasn't conducive for us to do it over the summers. And now Jyoti Singh, she no longer lives in Kashmir. She's actually moved back to Delhi. So yeah, but it was a fabulous experience, and I really enjoyed all of it for those 5 years that I did it. In fact, one of the photographers in my workshop is today a Pulitzer Prize winning photographer and called Ahmed Khan. and he has documented a lot of stuff that has been going on in Kashmir.
Nice. Thanks. Would love to connect on.
Thank you, but I'm happy. I've worked with schools, I mean, to do photography workshops, and I'm open to it and happy to it. So if Doon would like to call me to do a workshop, I'm happy to do it anytime.
Karam, have you been to the Kailash Mansarovar route?
No, I haven't.
Okay. I believe that's very interesting.
Hmm.
My dad went in 1984, I think. They walked from Dharchula, crossed the Lipu Lake, and then walked for another 2-3 days to the camp near Mansarovar.
Fabulous. Okay.
Yeah. So I went to Muktinath, which is a temple in the middle of Nepal.
That's right. Yeah, I've been there.
No.
As well, yeah. That's in the
And
Annapurna region.
pardon?
That's in the Annapurna region.
Yeah, that's just below Annapurna, and you have Dholagiri on one side. And apparently there's one very interesting animal there, which I can't remember the name now because I was in school then when we went. And they said that it's like a cross between a goat and a sheep.
That's right. So you get an animal there called the Himalayan tar, TAHR. There are two species of tar in the world. There's the Himalayan tar and the Nilgiri tar. We're very fortunate to have the Nilgiri tar in India. Of course, Himalayan tar is found in, again, the Everest region, Sagarmatha National Park, I think in parts of Sikkim as well. Endangered in the sense that they are critical because they are being poached for their meat by local people over there. I believe the Nilgiri tar is more protected, but it is a species that needs to be protected for sure. They're almost like a high altitude antelope, like a chiru almost, but they are part of the and again, like I said, I'm not a biologist or an expert. Other people will be able to give you more information on the Himalayan tar, but I have documented them as well.
Yeah, okay, because you said Sagarmatha, but this is a bit away from Sagarmatha because
That's
you
right.
know this is the Annapurna range.
That's
But
right.
even there, they said that the tar does hang out in that part of the country as well.
Mhm.
You know, because our guide pointed out one or two, but in the distance, and we just couldn't. You know, we were so tired when we reached up there. It was walking 14 kilometers, so. We just didn't pay attention. You know, my father and I, we were like completely pooped. But the other thing that, you know, when Edmund Hillary was here in my house, then he was mentioning a lot of the work that their foundation is doing in the Lukla and in that area.
Yeah. So their foundation deals primarily with education and healthcare for the local populations over there. The Khumbu region of Nepal was actually not really looked after a lot by the sort of the Nepalese government for a number of years. They were considered sort of backward people and sort of up in the mountains. So they started their own schools and their own hospitals, etc. And because it's so such a famous area for climbers, the Edmund Hillary Foundation actually started doing a lot of work there in education and healthcare.
Did you ever meet anyone in that side from their foundation? Because Peter was running it after Sir Edmund died.
Okay. No, I've met a bunch of volunteers who are over there who teach and do various things, but I'm not familiar with who runs the organization.
Okay, great. Chalo, but fantastic work you guys have done. You've done. Yeah, I mean it's amazing. All those books also that you've done with the Nawabs and all these people. You know, you left out the Nawab of Pataudi, unfortunately. But you know.
So the Nawab of Pataudi is some part of his family. The current Nawab of Pataudi is actually from Bhopal, so we have covered Bhopal in the book. Yeah.
Okay, because for the Pataudi Palace, I made 4 floor coverings for them some years ago. Yeah, because Mrs. Sharmila,
Tagore.
I don't know whether I should call it Tagore or whatever. She had got in touch with me and said that, you know, and then we worked out some designs and stuff like that. So I made some floor coverings for them. But there's another interesting aspect you could do. You know, the forts of India.
Yes.
Like if you do a project with Amarnath and all the Neemrana forts,
right?
Because they're now taking up more and more of the smaller forts in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh and that area, and
Mhm.
converting them into these little resort type of things, but keeping the old all the old facade.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely. Yeah.
so maybe that would make a fascinating, another book kind of thing. Just the Neemrana Fort group or whatever like that,
Mhm.
because some of their forts like Kesroli and all are
Yes.
really really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, it's a 14th century fort. I've actually been there. It's quite lovely.
Yeah. Okay.
So the next book that of mine will be out in September this year, and this book is really a never ever before seen perspective of this country. What I did was I worked very closely with the Madhya Pradesh government for
Uh-huh.
2 years, and I was given permission to shoot the entire state of Madhya Pradesh only with drones. So you can imagine the Great Stupa of Sanchi, Khajuraho,
Wow.
Orcha, the national parks, the cities of Mandu, only shot with drones.
Wow.
I worked very, very closely with the Madhya Pradesh Tourism Department because the kinds of permissions one needs to shoot a project like this are immense, from
Mhm.
all the way from the ASI permissions to Ministry
Yeah.
of Civil Aviation to the Airports Authority of India to State Archaeology to Forest Department to Police Department to local administration. The only way someone could do this book is with the Madhya Pradesh government, and I'm very happy to say that it's finally gone into print. It's taken me 3 years, but it will be available for everyone to see in later this year.
That must be fantastic because Mandu is a fantastic fort.
And
You
I
know.
specifically didn't include any of those photographs in this presentation because I thought
Mhm.
nice.
Well, that's okay.
But if
Because
you follow me
Mandu,
on Instagram, you'll be able to see it over there. So
I must do that. Must do that. Because Mandu is a fantastic fort.
it
You know,
really,
unfortunately, Kalinjar is, it's administered by the UP government. That's completely overgrown.
right.
But that fort also, if you could just, I mean, if somebody could get it cleaned up and all the overgrown everything removed, it's also one of the most fascinating forts in the country, and it's also the oldest.
Okay.
Kalinjar. It's the oldest fort in the existing fort in the country, apparently.
Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, there's a temple there which dates back to the Shunga times. Now the Shungas were, God knows when. I mean, like even before Harshvardhan and all.
Okay.
So yeah, but the fort came up, I think, in just about 1000 AD when the Chandelas were in Khajuraho.
Mhm.
That's when the Kalinjar fort came up.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
fascinating. I'd like to. I'm definitely going to read more about it now that you've told me. Maybe I'll head there next to document that.
Yeah, but you'll have to get it completely DVD'd. It's like there's like 5 feet of undergrowth all over the place.
Yeah,
It's
but
like
you've
mini
got
jungle.
you've got to do the before and after, so it's good to see it before as well.
Yeah, it's a mini jungle. We have a very interesting fort close by called Chunar,
Okay.
but unfortunately that's under the police. So
Okay.
they made a complete mess of it. They've like got whitewash and tuna and all over the place. And they just don't care when you tell them what you're doing. They said we have to keep it looking smart.
Mhm.
So looking smart, so you whitewash the walls and all the ramparts and all that, and you say it's looking smart. I mean, that's a bit ridiculous,
Right.
but that's how it is. Anyway, Karam, it was fantastic hearing all this stuff, and
Thank you so much, and thank you for everyone for being online and giving me the opportunity to speak. Before I log off and say thank you to everyone, I'd just like to give one last little anecdote and story. When I joined school in 1988, there was an e-form, and I joined school in e-form, and I had a teacher who only taught me one class in my second term, and I promise you, it changed my life absolutely and incredibly. He never taught me again in school, which is really unfortunate. And I even in my SNSE form, I took geography, and that was Mr. Philip Barrett. I'm not sure if he's on today or not, but Mr. Barrett, if you are, a big salute to you, and thank you very, very much for inspiring me to really explore the world. And if there's one teacher that made a difference in my life, Mr. Barrett, I never got an opportunity to tell him that in school, but 27 years later, now that I've left, a salute to you, cheers, and hope to share a beer with you soon.
Thank you, Karam. Thank you for that enthralling talk. Funnily, I reached out to Mr. Barrett yesterday because there were a lot of messages on the group. And we actually figured out a way we can reach out to school and help out in terms of conservation of the school and the biodiversity there.
Right.
So, I'm putting a separate group together. We'd love to have you also there. And I've asked Mr. Barrett also and Kavita and Adhiraj, all of us. And we'll see what we can approach to school about these various solutions that you've given. At least at the school level, we could do something.
Absolutely.
Thank you for taking the time. And it's a beautiful presentation. And I'm sure I'm going to meet you soon enough now.
Yeah, absolutely, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. That was
Thank you.
fantastic.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, Arush. Thank
Bye.
you very much. Thanks,
Bye.
Aziraj.
Thank you.
See you. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.